A gentle rain whispered against the window, its soft drumming like a foreign heartbeat in the quiet room. Claire Hammond stood frozen in her apartment, her gaze fixed on the plain brown package sitting on her kitchen counter. There was no return address, only her name scripted in a faded black ink. The drizzle outside wasn't a storm, but just enough to make the world seem to slow down, to mute its sounds as if holding its breath. Her fingers hovered above the cardboard, hesitant to make contact. The city hummed along, unaware of the disruption. Buses grumbled by, a neighbor shouted about forgotten keys, and the refrigerator droned on. Yet in the heart of her small kitchen, time itself had come to a standstill. She hadn't been expecting a delivery, she never was. Claire lived a minimalist life, free of clutter and devoid of expectations. In her carefully ordered world, every object had its purpose and surprises had no place. Still, this box felt like it belonged. She finally sat down, her hands shaking just a little as she peeled back the first piece of tape. Peeking under the cardboard flap, she caught a glimpse of light blue fabric and the shine of something silver. The fabric was a child's shirt, its color washed out with time, folded with care. Before she could brace herself, she recognized the tiny, embroidered butterfly near the collar. In that single moment, 20 years collapsed into an instant. The scene shifted to Asheville, North Carolina, on an autumn day 2 decades ago. The forest trail had always been a place of peace, but that morning something felt terribly wrong. The air was unnervingly still. There were no birds singing, no buzz of insects, only the wind gently rustling the trees as if urging them to be silent. A pickup truck crunched to a halt in the gravel lot at the trailhead. Sheriff Hale emerged, his boots heavy on the ground, his eyes scanning the mist that lingered between the trees like a ghost that refused to move on. He had been to this very spot before, 20 years ago, almost on the exact same date. It was the same trail, the same profound silence, and the same gaping absence. The Hammond case was a wound that had never properly healed. Marianne Hammond, 35, and her daughter Lena Hammond, 11, had vanished without a trace one afternoon after setting out for a walk on the Laurel Ridge Trail. Their names were found in the wooden register near the trail's start, and a disposable Kodak camera, developed days later by Claire's grandmother, captured their smiling faces. But after that moment, no one ever saw them again. There were no bodies discovered, no clues left behind, and no signs of a struggle. Their footprints never strayed from the path. It was as if two lives had simply dissolved into the air. Claire had only been 8 years old that day, kept home from the walk by a fever. She had stayed with Grandma Ruth in their cozy living room, watching cartoons with a piece of dry toast on her lap, completely unaware that she would never again hear her sister's laughter or the sound of her mother's voice. Back in her apartment, Claire carefully unfolded the small shirt. It carried a faint scent of cedar, suggesting it had been stored in an old, safe place for a long time. As she moved the fabric, a small envelope slipped out and drifted to the floor. Her chest tightened as she bent to pick it up. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. It showed her mother and sister standing side by side, beaming with happiness. It was a picture Claire had never seen before. In it, Marianne's hair was tied back in a loose braid, her eyes bright and full of life. Lena held a butterfly in her hand and wore a matching butterfly pendant around her neck. On the back of the photo, written in her mother's handwriting, were the words, "Forgive me, you were always the strong one." Claire let the photo fall from her grasp. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, its sound growing louder as if it was trying to cleanse the world of a terrible secret. After the initial investigation, the trail had been closed for 2 weeks. Search dogs had found nothing. Helicopters had scoured the area from above. Dozens of volunteers had painstakingly combed through every inch of the undergrowth and nearby creek beds, but their efforts yielded nothing. The last person known to have seen them was their neighbor, Jack Langford. He recalled waving to them that morning as they pulled out of their driveway. They looked happy, he had told the police. Just a mother and daughter going for a walk. I wish I'd known it would be the last time. Everyone in the small town of Asheville knew the Hammond family. Marianne was a beloved high school counselor, known for her kindness, empathy, and quiet nature. Her husband, Claire's father, had passed away in a car accident years before, and she had never remarried. Lena was a bright and inquisitive child who had once written in a school essay that she wanted to be a secret explorer when she grew up. That innocent detail had troubled the detectives for years. Was it a hint? A secret plan? All Claire could remember of that final morning was the gentle touch of her mom's hand on her forehead and the soft, whispered promise, "We'll be back before sunset, okay? Be good for Grandma." But they never returned. Now 2 decades later, Claire stood in the middle of her living room, clutching the photograph in one hand and the pendant in the other. It was the exact same pendant. She could even see that the clasp was still broken, just as she remembered. Her mother had always intended to get it fixed. There was no note to explain who sent the package, no fingerprints and no label, just her name and apartment number written in a neat, feminine script. The mailman had no memory of who delivered it. No one had buzzed to be let into the building, and the old complex had no security cameras. Yet, someone knew her address, someone knew her past, and someone wanted her to know that they were still watching. She sank onto the couch, holding the Polaroid. The butterfly pendant felt cold, heavy, and hauntingly familiar in her palm. A sudden knock on the door made her jump. She stayed perfectly still. A second knock, more insistent this time, echoed through the apartment. Rising slowly with the photo still in her hand, she walked to the door and opened it. Detective Ray Morales was standing on her doorstep. He was older now, with close-cropped gray hair and rain dripping from the brim of his coat. He hadn't seen her since she was a teenager. His eyes darted from the box on her table to her face. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. Claire Hammond never spoke of her mother and sister. She didn't mention them to her colleagues, her friends, or even in any meaningful way to her therapist. They were like phantoms, locked away behind a pleasant smile and concealed by a structured life full of routines she followed without fail. Mondays were for doing laundry, and Tuesdays were for buying groceries. On Wednesdays, she would shelve biographies on the third floor of the free library, in a quiet section at the back where she was never disturbed. Her life was neat and predictable, but that all changed when the package arrived. Afterward, everything she came into contact with seemed fragile and uncertain. The wheels of the library cart seemed to squeak more loudly than before. Even her tea, the same brand she had been drinking for years, now tasted bitter. That afternoon, she found herself staring at her reflection in the break-room mirror, unable to turn away. Her hair was styled in its typical bun, with every strand perfectly in place. She wore no makeup, only the familiar tinted chapstick she had used since her high school days. But looking back from behind her own eyes was a new person, someone who was watching, someone who was remembering. Claire's memories had always come in disconnected pieces. The way light streamed through the curtains in her childhood bedroom, the sound of her mother's rings clinking against the sink while she washed the dishes, or the sound of Lena's laughter carrying in from the backyard. However, the period after they disappeared was a completely different matter. There was never a funeral or any sense of closure. Instead, there were just casseroles left on their doorstep by neighbors and uncomfortable silences from teachers who would ask if her parents were coming to the next school meeting. And then there was Grandma Ruth, who seemed to age too fast under the strain of keeping the family from falling apart. Claire had taught herself to tuck her grief away, much like folding laundry, neatly and without a fuss. By the time she was 16, she had given up on asking questions. By 22, she had relocated to Philadelphia. And by 28, she had successfully forced herself to forget the sound of Lena's voice. She was sitting with Ray Morales at a cafe located across the street from the station. He watched her as he stirred his coffee. "You've changed," he observed. Claire didn't answer, instead just looking out the window. "You always used to ask questions every time I came by," he continued. "You wanted to know if I had any new leads. Then, all of a sudden, you just stopped. I assumed you had finally moved on." "I didn't move on," Claire stated quietly. "I just moved around it." Ray leaned closer to her. "Are you certain you're prepared to revisit all of this?" Claire reached into her purse and pulled out the butterfly pendant, its silver surface now dull from the passage of time. She carefully set it on the table that separated them. "I'm not the one who opened this back up," she said. "Someone else did it for me." It had been 5 years since Detective Morales had retired, but he had never truly let go of the Hammond case. There was always something about it that seemed unresolved. It wasn't merely the absence of evidence. It was the profound silence that surrounded it. The fact that nobody in that close-knit community claimed to have seen anything, or the way Jack Langford would never make eye contact. Ray Morales had developed a habit of reviewing the case files every few months, almost as if he hoped the answers within them might have changed with age. Now the pendant was right in front of him, a cold and tangible piece of the past. "This is the one your sister was wearing," he confirmed. Claire nodded in agreement. "My mom's handwriting was on the back of the photo," she whispered. "It's her, I'm sure of it." Ray drummed his fingers on his coffee cup. "Then we need to go back." Claire had not set foot in Asheville for 11 years, with her last visit being for Grandma Ruth's funeral. The town felt both exactly the same and entirely new. The diner on Main Street had new owners, yet the familiar smell of fried okra still hung in the air. The old bookshop had been turned into a trendy boutique. Children were riding their bikes on the very same sidewalks where she and Lena used to run barefoot during the summer. She found a small room to rent above an antique shop near the courthouse. The room had creaky floorboards, no television, and a faint smell of dust and pine, as if the past had decided to stay. The following morning she found herself standing in front of her childhood house. The white paint was peeling, the shutters were drooping, and the home looked utterly empty. A "for sale" sign, partially obscured by weeds, hung crookedly near the front walk. She stepped onto the porch and shut her eyes. For a moment she could almost hear her mom humming in the kitchen and the sizzle of pancakes on the griddle. She could almost hear Lena shouting from the yard, "Come look." A slight noise caused her to turn around. An elderly woman was standing by the fence line. "Claire?" the woman asked hesitantly. It was Mrs. Nash, an old friend of her mother's. Time had not been kind to her. Her hands trembled as she held a small grocery bag close to her body. "I had no idea you were back in town," she said. "I won't be staying for long," Claire told her. "You look so much like your mother," Mrs. Nash remarked. "You have the same eyes and the same look of worry." Claire attempted a smile, but the warmth didn't reach her eyes. "You ought to stop by the church on Sunday," Mrs. Nash suggested as she began to walk away. "There are still some people who remember." Claire remained silent. The difficult part wasn't remembering. It was dealing with what you remembered when nobody else seemed to want to. Back in her room at the antique store, Claire discovered something that had been slid under her door. It was a yellowed newspaper clipping, and there was no note with it. The headline from October 2005 read, "Mother and daughter missing. Search suspended after 10 days." Written underneath the headline in red ink were the words, "She wasn't supposed to be found." Claire felt her breath catch in her throat. She rushed to the window and looked down at the empty street below. There were no footsteps, no passing cars, and no lurking shadows, but she could sense it. Someone had been there. The memories started to return with more clarity now. She could recall the scent of her mom's perfume and the gentle sound of Lena's voice as she read her bedtime stories. She remembered the necklace and how her mother, Marianne, had called it her wings. "I wear this to remind myself that I can always fly away if I need to," she had once told Claire while brushing her hair before school. Claire hadn't grasped the meaning then, but now she wondered if her mother had meant it literally. She met with Ray the next morning at the old police station, which had since been turned into a municipal office. He had brought the box with him. "The fingerprint analysis didn't give us much," he explained. "The surface could have been wiped clean." "Did you run a check on handwriting databases?" she asked. He nodded. "Nothing definite, but the writing is a match for your mom's samples from old school yearbooks." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, there was a copy of an old incident report. Claire stared at it, confused. "What is this?" It was filed a month before they went missing, Ray said. Your mother reported a break-in. She claimed that she believed someone had been in the house, but since nothing was stolen, she didn't want to press any charges. Claire had never been told about this. She informed the officer, who responded that she felt like she was being watched, Ray continued. Claire looked down at the report. She was afraid. Ray nodded, and suddenly 100 different things began to make sense. That evening, Claire sat on the floor of her room, twisting the pendant around her fingers. There was another knock at the door, but this one was gentler. When she opened it, there was no one there, only a shoebox left in the hallway. She brought it inside and found a stuffed animal, a small, faded bear. She recognized that its right ear had been sewn back on by her. It was Lena's favorite toy. Her hands trembled as she lifted it from the box. Taped to the bottom was a note that read, "She didn't want you to forget." It was then that she smelled it. Amidst the scents of dust and cedar, there was something else: smoke. The hallway was quickly filling with it. Someone had started a fire on the stairwell. Clutching the bear, she ran with her heart pounding in her chest. Somewhere behind her, through the smoky haze in the hallway, a figure retreated back into the shadows. Struggling to breathe, Claire made her way through the dense, gray smoke. Behind her, the hallway radiated an intense heat. The fire was not yet fully out of control, but it was certainly real. Flames coiled around the base of the stairs, appearing to stretch upward in her direction. Her heart pounded in her chest as she clutched the teddy bear more firmly in her hand. It was nearly impossible for her to see. Acting on pure instinct, her legs carried her beyond the antique store staircase, through the back exit, and into the alley behind the structure. The cold air felt like a slap against her lungs. She doubled over, overcome by a violent coughing fit. She knew someone had tried to trap her. This was not an accident. There had been no scent of burning electrical wires, no sign of danger beforehand. And she remembered the silhouette she saw in the hazy air. Someone either wanted her gone or wanted her out of the way. But why would they send the bear first? She glanced down at it. The note was still secured to its bottom with tape. She didn't want you to forget. Who was she? It had to be her mother, Lena, and why was this happening now? Detective Morales walked back and forth in front of the fire-damaged building as the fire marshal concluded his investigation. The marshal reported that no accelerants were discovered. He suggested it might have been caused by old wiring, but it was difficult to be certain. Claire chose to stay silent. She gave him no information about the figure she had seen in the hallway, nor did she mention the note or the bear. She felt she couldn't, at least not yet. Instead, she just gazed at her own reflection in the window of a shop across the street, finding her own face strangely unfamiliar. That evening, Claire was unable to sleep. She checked into a budget motel located near the edge of the city, the type of place with humming lights and fractured tile floors. She was indifferent to the conditions. Her only requirement was a door that she could lock. She set the stuffed bear on the bedside table next to the butterfly pendant, placing the two ghostly mementos together. At approximately 3 in the morning, she abruptly sat up in bed. A ringing filled her ears, and then she heard it, a soft scraping noise from the adjacent room. The sound ceased, then started again like an object being slowly pulled across the floor. She got out of bed and pressed her ear against the wall. There was silence. This was followed by a quiet knock, but it wasn't on her door. It came from the wall itself. 3 unhurried taps. Claire moved away from the wall. Just then, the lights flickered and went out completely. The following morning, Claire phoned Ray. "I am being followed," she told him. He did not question how she knew. His only question was, "Do you still have the Polaroid?" She confirmed that she did. "Bring it," he said. Back at the police station, Ray led her to the old evidence archive, which was now just a forgotten, dusty room where old case files were left to be forgotten. He pulled open a file drawer with the label Hammond, ML inside. She saw photographs she had never seen before, along with search maps and lists of volunteers. There was a list of names from the church Marianne had attended, and a second list containing the names of men her mother had provided counseling to at the school. Claire's blood ran cold when she saw one particular name, Gregory Shaw. She knew that name. He had worked as a janitor at her elementary school. She remembered her mother once saying he was a troubled person who had sought her help and had made her feel uneasy. There had never been any proof connecting him to anything. But as she looked at the list now, Claire felt the small hairs on her arms stand up. Ray saw her reaction. "He used to stare," she said, "not at me but at Lena." Ray drew a circle around the name. Claire's eyes moved down the list again, below Shaw's name, and saw another familiar entry, Jack Langford, her former neighbor. She felt as if the ground was shifting under her feet. What on earth was Jack's name doing on this list? Claire had not seen Jack Langford for many years. He continued to reside at the same address, located at the end of Sycamore Lane near the edge of the forest. She parked her car on the opposite side of the street, her heart racing. His driveway was vacant and no lights were on inside the house, but the mailbox was hanging open, and a rain-soaked newspaper was on the steps. She approached the door cautiously and knocked one time, but there was no response. She tested the doorknob and found it was unlocked. "Jack," she said into the house. Again there was no reply. She went inside. The air smelled of dust and aged wood. The house was cold and completely quiet. The walls were covered with dozens of pictures of sunsets, birds, and trees, but none of them featured any people. She walked towards the back room and then stopped in her tracks. Sitting on the desk was a small cardboard box, and next to it was a note written in unsteady handwriting. "I'm sorry, Claire. I didn't know how else to help." She lifted the lid of the box. Within it was a VHS tape with no label. She spun around and let out a scream. Jack was standing in the doorway, his face ashen and his eyes bloodshot. "I didn't hurt them," he said in a quiet voice. "I swear to God." Jack Langford sat on the steps of his porch, his head buried in his hands. "I didn't know their whereabouts, I promise, but I was aware she was planning something." Claire sat quietly next to him. "Your mom visited me a week before they vanished. She told me she was frightened. She said someone was watching them. She didn't have faith in the police. She told me that if anything were to happen, I was supposed to give you this." He gestured with his head towards the tape. "I never imagined you would return." Claire held the VHS tape tightly. "Why didn't you give this to me before now?" "Because," Jack said, his voice cracking with emotion, "the day after they went missing, somebody left a note on the windshield of my truck. It said, 'Stay quiet or she'll stay gone.'" Claire managed to find an old VCR at a second-hand shop. That night in her motel room, she inserted the tape. The television screen flickered with snowy static. Then the face of her mother, illuminated by a soft yellow light, appeared. She was in a bedroom that Claire did not recognize. The camera was unsteady, likely balanced on something. Marianne looked straight at the camera lens. "If you're watching this," she began, "then something has gone wrong." Claire felt her heart stop. "I don't have enough time to explain everything. I'm sorry that I didn't take you with me. I had to protect at least one of you." She fought back tears. "There is someone who does not want the truth to be revealed. I tried to run. He always finds me. If Lena and I go missing, remember the butterfly." The screen went black. Claire felt like she couldn't breathe. Who was he? Was it Gregory Shaw or someone else? And why did her mother not go to the police? She replayed the tape over and over, and with each viewing she noticed additional details. There was a photograph in the background, a motel logo, and a calendar showing the date October 12, 2005. This was the day after they had disappeared, meaning the tape was recorded after that event. They had been alive, at least for a short time. Ray was able to confirm her discovery. "That motel, it's the Pines just outside of Knoxville. It was closed down in 2007, but I recall that place. It was run down and off the beaten path." Claire packed a suitcase. She was going to go there. When she arrived at the site of the old motel, she found that only the building's framework was left, consisting of decaying wood and broken windows. But inside, underneath the floorboards of room number 6, she discovered it, a locked tin box. Inside the box was another photograph. It showed Lena, looking slightly older with her hair cut shorter, holding up a drawing of a butterfly. In the background behind her, there was a road sign that was faint but still readable, Rockbridge County. It was another clue, but also in the box was a birth certificate. It wasn't hers and it wasn't Lena's. It was for a baby born in 2006. No father was listed. The mother's name was Marianne Hammond. Claire collapsed to her knees. Her mother had been alive and had given birth to a baby. She had a sibling she had never known about. Back at her motel, she laid everything out on the bed. The pendant, the stuffed bear, the pictures, the note, the VHS tape, and the birth certificate. Someone had been feeding her these items in stages, knowing precisely what she needed to find and when. But it was clear someone else was also watching her. That night she discovered a note tucked under her car's windshield wiper. It read, "Stop digging. Some ghosts are meant to stay buried." Upon discovering the birth certificate, Claire did not shed a tear. Instead, she remained motionless for a considerable time, her gaze fixed on the name Noah Hammond. The document stated he was born a year after her mother and sister were officially listed as missing. His place of birth was recorded as Rockbridge County, Virginia. She wondered how this information had stayed hidden from everyone. She questioned if he was still living and if he was all right. The realization that she had a brother settled heavily in her chest, feeling as solid and real as a stone. Ray arranged to see her at the old train depot located just outside of Asheville, which had been converted into a cafe known for its poorly made coffee and peeling wallpaper. He examined the photographs she brought without saying a word. In a low voice he said, "I'll make a call to someone in Virginia." Claire then asked him, "Do you finally believe me now?" Ray looked directly at her and replied, "I never stopped believing you. I just never imagined I would have another opportunity to prove it." He then pushed a sheet of paper toward her on the table. It contained an address in Rockbridge County for a farmhouse that was once leased to a woman using the name Ann Hill. This was significant because Marianne's maiden name had been Hill. Claire did not think twice. She was already in the process of packing a bag for the trip. The farmhouse was isolated, surrounded by dry fields and trees that seemed to whisper in the wind. When Claire got out of her rental car, she was immediately struck by the profound stillness of the place. It wasn't complete silence, but rather a feeling of suspension, the type of quiet that hangs over locations where a momentous event has occurred. The front door was slightly ajar. Once inside, she saw that a layer of dust covered every surface. A child's drawing was still attached to the refrigerator, showing two stick figures, one taller than the other, holding the hand of the smaller one. Beneath them, written in red crayon, were the words, "Mom and me." A lump formed in Claire's throat. On the kitchen counter sat a familiar mug decorated with butterflies, its colors faded and its rim chipped. In the main living area, she discovered a box filled with toys that had clearly not been played with for many years. Then in the bedroom, she found a ripped page from a journal hidden beneath a floorboard. The note read, "I can hear trucks during the night. He has located us. I don't believe we will be able to stay here much longer." There was no signature, but she instantly recognized the handwriting as her mother's. After returning to town, Claire looked through county records and found the name of the property's owner, a 62-year-old woman named Judith Emmons, who was now a resident at a care facility in Lexington. Claire went to visit her the following day. Judith's memory appeared hazy and fragmented. However, when Claire brought up the name Ann Hill, a flicker of recognition appeared in her eyes. She had a little boy, Judith recalled, a very sweet child with big brown eyes. They left in a great rush, right in the middle of the night. They didn't even pack their dishes. Claire asked, "Did she explain why?" Judith gave a slow nod. "She told me someone dangerous was searching for her. She made me promise to never reveal to anyone that they had been here, and I kept that promise." Claire gently squeezed her hand and asked, "Do you have any idea where they went?" Judith whispered, "No, but she mentioned she was heading west. She said it was safer in the mountains." Claire pursued every small lead she could find. She combed through databases for missing people, made calls to older women listed in church directories, and even traveled to Tennessee to meet a woman who at one point claimed she had seen Marianne at a shelter. However, it turned out to be a case of mistaken identity. The number of false leads grew, each one feeling like a small, stinging, and relentless paper cut. Throughout this entire time, someone was constantly watching her. A motel employee informed her that a man had been there asking questions about her. One morning, She found the side mirror of her car had been smashed. Her phone would frequently buzz with calls from blocked numbers, but whenever she answered, there was only silence. Then another envelope arrived. It had no return address. Within it was a photograph of a teenage girl. Claire's breathing stopped. The girl was Lena, but she was older now. She appeared to be about 16, had a new haircut, and there was a bruise visible under her eye. On the back of the photo was a message. She didn't want you to find her. Claire felt weak and collapsed into a nearby chair. This was far from over. Ray managed to trace the background of the photograph to a high school in Colorado named Sella High School, and the year was 2011. Claire was on a flight there the very next day. She approached the school secretary, pretending to be a researcher for a documentary. The secretary squinted at the photograph. "Oh, that's Ellie Hill," she said. Claire stood frozen. She was a student here for only one semester. She was very quiet when she arrived and even quieter when she left. Claire asked, "Do you still have her school records?" The secretary replied, "Not any longer. Her mother withdrew her from the school. She explained they were moving but provided no new address." Claire just stared down the empty school hallway. Her sister had been in this very place, alive and using a different name. A computer at the local library provided her with another piece of the puzzle, a news article from the Salad Times from January of 2012. The headline mentioned that a local woman and her daughter were missing after a severe storm. The names listed were Anne and Ellie Hill, missing once again. Claire read through the entire article as a knot formed in her stomach. No bodies had ever been recovered. Their car had been swept away in a flash flood, and the investigation had been closed. However, Claire refused to believe it. The sequence of events was too deliberate. They would disappear, then reappear somewhere else, only to disappear again, as if they were being relentlessly pursued. Ray called her that evening. "I've discovered something," he said. He had conducted a background check on Gregory Shaw. It turned out that Shaw had been arrested back in 2007 in West Virginia while using a fake name. The charges were for trespassing and stalking, but they were eventually dismissed due to a lack of sufficient evidence. The victim in that case was a single mother. Her name was sealed in the official documents, but Ray had obtained a copy of the police report. The handwriting on that report was a perfect match for the note Claire had found left under her car's windshield. "It's the same pen," Ray noted, "the same ink, the same style of writing." "It's him," Claire whispered in disbelief. "He is still searching for them," Ray concluded, "and now he is also searching for you." Claire went back to Asheville. The case had become too complex and had too many layers. It was then that a second package was delivered, brought by someone directly to her door with no postage stamp. Inside, she found a USB drive, a necklace, and a note. The necklace was instantly recognizable. It was her mother's original one, not the copy Claire had found several weeks before. The note stated, "She's alive, but not for long. If you continue to interfere, you will die." Claire inserted the USB drive into her computer. A video began to play. The footage was grainy and had been filmed from a distance. It showed a woman walking into a grocery store in Utah. She had shoulder-length hair and was wearing sunglasses, and she was by herself. For a brief moment, the woman turned her head towards the camera. Claire let out a gasp. It was Marianne. She looked older and very tired, but she was definitely alive. Claire showed the video to Ray. He processed it using facial recognition software, which returned an 87% match. "We have to go to Utah," he declared. "But what if she's on the run again?" Claire questioned. Ray looked at her and posed another question. "What if she's no longer running?" Claire paused. She knew that every step she took forward came at a price, costing her time, sleep, her sense of sanity, and her safety. But she was so close to finding the truth. She was too close to give up now. She began to pack her bag once more. This time, however, she wasn't just searching for answers. She was searching for her family. As she was driving west, her phone rang. It was a blocked number. She decided to answer it. A man's voice on the other end said, "You were supposed to forget." Then the line went dead. As Claire drove on the desert highways of Utah, she felt the overwhelming silence of the surrounding mountains. The grocery store featured in the video was located in a town named Cedar Ridge, a secluded and unremarkable spot situated between red rock formations and swept by dry winds that seemed to carry secrets never meant to be spoken. She pulled into town just as dusk was settling. Ray was already present, sitting in a rental car and waiting for her. He offered her a coffee, which she took without saying thank you. He hadn't expected her to. For several hours they observed the store. There was no trace of the woman, not at first. However, at precisely 7:46 p.m., a recognizable figure appeared from the other side of the parking lot. With her head lowered and sunglasses concealing her eyes, it was her. Claire shot up from her seat so quickly that her coffee spilled. The woman was older and thinner, dressed in a gray hoodie, and she moved with the cautiousness of someone skilled at remaining unnoticed. It was Marianne Hammond. Claire started to walk out into the open, but Ray caught her by the arm, urging her to wait because they didn't know who else might be observing. Claire broke free from his grasp, but Marianne had already vanished. She had gotten into a car, merged with the traffic, and disappeared into the flow of time once more. They managed to get the license plate number. Ray had connections within the DMV systems, and he discovered the car was registered to a Susan Ellis in Bluffdale, Utah. The name was fake, and there were no previous records associated with it. The address pointed them to a small trailer park on the outskirts of town. Claire knocked just one time. The door opened a little, and Marianne was standing there. It was her mother, now 20 years older but still wearing the same butterfly necklace. She didn't let out a gasp or begin to cry. She simply uttered a single word, "No," and tried to push the door shut. Claire forced it to stay open. "You're the one who sent the package," she stated. Marianne's expression was like stone. "You shouldn't have come inside." The trailer had a scent of lemon oil and old books. Claire sat down tensely at the table as Marianne prepared tea, her hands shaking while she poured. "I sent it because I believed you were still looking," Marianne finally explained. "I never anticipated that you would travel this far." Claire pressed forward. "You sent your pendant to me. You sent me Lena's shirt and the photograph." "I wanted you to remember," Marianne replied, "not to bring it all back up again." Claire leaned in closer. "Is she still alive?" Marianne raised her eyes. A long silence followed before she answered, "Yes." A wave of relief washed over Claire and her fingers tightened their grip on the table. "Where is she?" "She does not want to be found," Marianne said. The explanation unfolded in fragments. After she disappeared, Marianne had taken Lena and fled. They changed their identities and survived on cash from a secret bank account. She had been in a relationship with an abusive man, not Claire's father, but someone she met years afterward named Gregory Shaw. She had kept it a secret from everyone, including the police. He was a friendly and seemingly trustworthy employee at the school, but he became obsessive. When she attempted to end their contact, he started appearing at her home, leaving drawings on her car's windshield and notes in her mailbox. On one occasion, she awoke to find him standing in her backyard, simply watching her. She filed a report once, but nothing came of it, so she ran. She orchestrated the disappearance on the trail because she wanted Claire to be safe, and the only way to ensure that was to leave her behind. Claire was speechless. The sense of betrayal was a burning pain, yet it was intertwined with a deeper emotion, understanding. "I was only 8 years old," she said. "I waited for you to return every single day." "I am aware," Marianne whispered. "I watched you grow up from a distance, always from far away." "And what about Lena?" A shadow passed over Marianne's face. "She left when she turned 16. She told me she wanted her own life. We have not communicated in years. But the photo. She sent it to me as a warning. She is still terrified of him." Claire shook her head in disbelief. "So he is still alive and he is still pursuing you?" "Yes," Marianne confirmed. "And now he is also pursuing you." They spoke all through the night. Claire discovered that she had a brother, Noah, who was now 18. He was living with foster parents in Idaho. Marianne had given him up for adoption because her fear had become unbearable. She did not want him to have a life of being hunted. She had been observing him from afar ever since. "He has no idea who I am," she said, "but he is safe." Claire looked intently at her mother. "You cannot keep running forever." Marianne appeared exhausted. But I have for 2 decades. Just then there was a knock on the trailer door. Both women stiffened. It was Ray's voice. "It's me." Marianne opened the door. He came inside and looked at her. "It is good to finally meet you," he said. She glanced at the badge he no longer officially carried. "You are not here to take me into custody. I am here to ensure Claire's safety," he replied. Ray made some calls and used his old connections. He managed to get them a place in a safe house about 50 miles away. However, that night an intruder broke into the trailer. Cushions had been slashed open and drawers were ransacked. This time, no message was left, only an open window and a single butterfly pendant crushed on the floor. It was a clear warning. He was aware that they were near. Claire was unable to sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling of the safe house, her mind racing to make sense of everything. A mother who had disappeared to keep her safe, a sister who had vanished all over again, a brother she had never known, and a man who was still a menacing presence in the background of their lives. She turned to Ray. "We have to find Lena." With Ray's help, they were able to trace a cell phone registered under the name Eleanor Hill, which had been used to buy a bus ticket in Denver. Claire got on the next bus. She located Lena working in a bookstore. Her hair was now colored red and she was wearing glasses. When Lena saw Claire, she froze for a moment and then walked away. Claire caught up with her in the alley behind the store. "Lena, please." Lena stopped and turned around. "Why are you here now?" Claire was at a loss for words. "I believed you were dead." "I wanted to be," Lena replied. They sat on some crates without speaking. Then Lena began to talk. "He located me last year. I had to move again. I am always moving." "You sent the photograph," Claire said. Lena nodded. "I thought if you saw what he did, you might decide to stay away." Claire gently touched her arm. "Together we can put a stop to him." "No," Lena said firmly. "You cannot stop someone like him. You can only survive them." Claire looked into her sister's eyes. This was not the sister she remembered, but she was the sister she had now. "We will do this together." Back at the safe house, they came up with a strategy. Lena had been monitoring Gregory's online activities. He was completely fixated on Marianne, posting anonymously on forums and writing cryptic blog entries. The themes were consistently about forgiveness, obsession, and wings. They decided to set a trap for him. Claire left a message on a forum he frequented. "I still wear the necklace. I'm ready to come home." It did not take long for a response. An email came the following day. It contained no words, only a set of coordinates that pointed to a cabin near the original trail where they had disappeared, bringing everything full circle. Ray was against the idea of going. He argued that it was far too dangerous, but Claire was certain they had no other choice. She insisted, "If we don't finish this right now, it will go on forever." They drove there in complete silence. The forest seemed darker, denser, and colder than Claire recalled. The cabin was isolated on the edge of a ridge with a single light flickering in the window. They entered. The cabin was empty. Then a voice spoke from the shadows. "I had a feeling you would come back." Gregory Shaw emerged. He looked older and gaunt, but he was smiling. Standing behind him was Noah, 18 years old, looking confused and scared. He was Claire's brother. The silence that filled the cabin was profound. Claire gazed at the young man before her. It was Noah, 18, just as her mother had described. His hair was overgrown and his hoodie seemed too thin for the mountain air. He looked at her as if she were the first person he had seen in a long time. Gregory Shaw stood behind him with a hand on his shoulder like a puppeteer controlling his marionette. "You do not belong here," he stated. "None of you do." Lena moved forward. "Let him go." Gregory's smile was slow and chilling. "I provided him with a life, a home, food, and security while all of you were running away." Claire's hands clenched into fists. "You abducted him." "I found him," Gregory corrected her. "Your mother deserted him." Marianne's voice trembled from behind them. "I gave him up to keep him safe." Gregory faced her. "You handed him over to the system. I was the one who raised him." Claire positioned herself between them. "This all stops tonight." Gregory reached inside his coat. Ray reacted immediately, pulling Claire behind him, but Gregory did not pull out a weapon. Instead, it was a journal. He threw it onto the table. Noah flinched. Claire opened the journal and her breath caught in her throat. It was filled with drawings, dozens of them depicting butterflies' eyes and chains. There was a silhouette of a woman with broken wings. It was page after page of pure obsession. "Do you understand now?" Gregory asked. "We were always destined to be linked, all of us like a family." "You are mentally disturbed," Lena whispered. "No," he countered. "I am enlightened." Ray had been quietly moving to a position behind Claire. He signaled with his eyes, telling her to keep him talking. Claire looked at Noah. "Do you trust him?" Noah's voice was unsteady. "He told me that you all abandoned me, that you were the dangerous ones." Claire moved a step closer. "He was lying." "I don't know who to believe," Noah said. "You don't have to," she replied. "You only need to make a choice." Gregory's smile vanished. He started to move toward Claire. "Stay back," Ray commanded, his gun now drawn. "Guns cannot mend broken families," Gregory said, his gaze fixed on Claire. "They can prevent them from becoming worse," Ray responded. Gregory suddenly lunged forward. Ray fired a single shot into the wall next to him. The noise echoed through the room, shattering the silence. Noah screamed. Marianne covered her mouth with her hands. Lena stood frozen. Gregory fell to his knees, not from a bullet but from sheer defeat. Ray kicked the journal out of his reach. Claire rushed to Noah's side and for the very first time touched his face. "I am your sister," she whispered. His eyes filled with tears. "I don't know you, but you will," she promised. The police arrived within an hour. Gregory was taken into custody without putting up a fight. He smiled throughout the entire walk to the police car. Noah sat wrapped in a blanket next to the cruiser, not saying a word. Claire did not try to force him to talk. Marianne stood in the clearing, her gaze fixed on the trailhead, the very spot where she had disappeared 20 years earlier. Lena came to stand beside her. "I resented you for leaving me behind," she admitted. "I know," Marianne said, "but now I understand." Marianne nodded. "I never wanted you to have the kind of childhood I did." "I didn't," Lena replied. "I just never really had a chance to grow up at all." They held each other in an embrace for the first time in 2 decades. Claire remained in Asheville for several more weeks, long enough to see the leaves change color and to begin to know Noah. He was a quiet and intelligent boy, easily startled by sudden movements, but he had a gentle nature. She showed him the places where she had grown up, like the old swing set and the pond. He smiled once, a brief but meaningful smile. It was enough for now. Lena made the choice to stay nearby for the time being and found a position at the public library. Claire assisted her in setting up an email account. Marianne settled into a cabin that Ray had helped her find, which was off the grid but cozy. On occasion, they would all gather for dinner. Their time together was uncomfortable, yet lovely and authentic. One evening, Claire sat by herself on the trail where everything had started. The same wooden sign stood there, and the same wind rustled through the trees. She removed the pendant from around her neck and buried it in the dirt next to a rock. She no longer felt the need for it. It was raining on the morning Claire departed from Asheville. The rain was not heavy, just a light drizzle that blurred her windshield and seemed to soften the edges of the world. She observed the trees as they bent with the wind, as if they were bowing slowly and respectfully, as if the forest itself had been waiting all this time for someone to return and bring the story to a close. The trail was still there with the same wooden gate and gravel path, but something within her had shifted. She parked her car, got out, and walked into the woods. This time she wasn't there to disappear but to remember. In the clearing near the ridge she found the rock where she had left the pendant. It was now partially covered by dirt and leaves, which were starting to reclaim it. She did not try to dig it up. She let it remain buried. Some memories are not meant to be forgotten. They are meant to be laid to rest. A few days later, back in her home in Philadelphia, Claire was standing before a classroom. She had accepted a job teaching a writing class at a community center. One of the writing exercises she gave her students was, "Write about something you lost and how it returned to you in a different form." One student wrote about his dog, another about lost time, and another about his voice. Claire did not write anything that day. She simply looked at the sentence on the board and deeply felt its meaning. Lena came to visit a month after that. She stayed in Claire's guest room, read all the books on the nightstand, and left sticky notes on nearly every page. Noah called her once a week. His calls were quiet and cautious, but he was gradually becoming more open. Marianne sent postcards, though never from her actual location. Old habits are hard to break. One night a package arrived for Claire. There was no return address. Her heart tightened with apprehension. Inside she found a photograph of 6 people: Claire, Lena, Noah, Marianne, Ray, and Mrs. Nash. It had been taken outside the cabin a few weeks prior. On the back, written in a familiar hand, were the words, "This is what healing looks like." Claire smiled. For the first time her past felt less like a burden and more like an anchor, something that kept her grounded rather than held her back. She put the photograph in a frame and placed it on a shelf next to a small ceramic piece that Lena had given her. It had a sticky note that read, "For the days when you forget how far you've come." On the anniversary of the disappearance, Claire sat alone near Laurel Ridge, not to grieve but to reflect. She took a notebook from her bag and started to write. Once a girl disappeared, as did her mother, and so did time. But what the world sometimes calls lost simply means transformed. She changed, and so did I. The sunlight streamed through the tree branches, warm and golden. Claire closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, she did not feel like someone who was waiting. She felt like someone who had finally found her place. And then, just as it had 20 years ago, a gentle rain began to fall, tapping softly against the leaves. The sound was soft and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The world seemed to hold its breath once more, but this time Claire was able to breathe out.